Ukraine claims to have intel identifying Russia's next target. And what is Russia's deadline? Plus, how are they going to solve their manpower crisis? Are they reaching deep into the well? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about all of it. So, first off, Ukrainian intelligence has reported that Russia is targeting the town of Chasiv Yar for their summer offensive. Their ambition is to seize the town by the 9th of May. Now, as you guys can probably see, Russian forces have been attempting to make a sort of three-pronged advance into the town, one of which is along this roadway here, while the other one is through Bodanivka, and of course the final prong through this small creek here. And none of these are very tactically sound advances, right? You can see Bodanivka is on low ground with Ukrainian forces holding out in this northern sector where they have the high ground. This middle prong is, of course, a frontal assault into the town, which historically has been a very bad choice for Russia. And of course, going along the low ground here, right, literally in the creek, is literally putting yourself, you're literally in the barrel, right? You're in the lowest of the low ground. And so if we've looked elsewhere in this war, Russia has almost never been able to seize a urban area like this without first securing the flanks, right? So Russia would have to at least seize the town of Kalinivka and likely some of this territory here in the south. But you can see that it's actually a pretty tall order for them. And while I have to acknowledge that Ukraine itself has said the situation on the Eastern Front is much more tenuous than it's been historically. And so, you know, the properly equipped Ukrainian armed forces would just grind Russians into the dirt here, right? Without the Russian forces establishing good flanking positions, they're going to have a really hard time of seizing this town. That said, given the constraints of the Ukrainian military right now, I would say all bets are off. This might be the time where a frontal assault works for Russia. But it can't work because Russia has been accruing an absolutely tremendous number of casualties. So much so that the UK's Ministry of Defense Intelligence is actually revealed that Russia is advertising and trying to recruit foreign nationals to join the Russian armed forces and fight in Ukraine. They obtained a leaflet written in English asking foreigners to join a, quote, special unit in the Russian army. Now, this special unit could just be designated for foreigners, or like the International Volunteers of Ukraine, it could be designated based on language groups, right? There's a Spanish-speaking unit, English-speaking units, French-speaking units, etc. But I think it's more likely the special unit is code for assault unit. And the reason is because, note the benefits. First off, a fairly expensive $2,200 a month and a $2,000 signing bonus, a Russian passport, as well as free medical treatment and training. I always got to love when they send you to war and they're like, we'll give you free medical treatment. I'm like, yeah, because you're going to be the ones injuring me. But the thing is, in the wake of those attacks on the Moscow theater by Central Asian nationals, the rhetoric coming from the Kremlin has been extremely xenophobic, extremely anti-immigrant. So it seems very bizarre that Russia would, out of one side of their mouths, make all these anti-immigrant statements, and on the other side, they would offer Russian passports to foreign nationals, unless, of course, Russia doesn't expect these foreign nationals to live long enough to actually get the passport. I think that is probably the Russian strategy here. It's very similar to what they did to the Wagner Group, where they offered these criminals a pardon, essentially, and freedom. All they had to do was survive brutal Wagner assaults. And at a high enough attrition rate, very few of them actually made it to that point. And I think that's probably the plan for these foreign nationals as well. Of course, last year, it was leaked that there were online advertisements looking for citizens in Armenia and Kazakhstan, offering about the same salary, a very large sign-on bonus. There's also rumors that they were approaching Central Asian migrants, but we've seen on this channel actually Chinese volunteers, we've seen Indian volunteers, Nepalese workers who get recruited to fight, and even Somalis. And what I think it's interesting is that they point out that many of these recruits are not actually professional soldiers, but I suspect they're migrant workers, right, who are given a limited level of training. And it says coerced to fight under false pretenses. I've heard those rumors as well, that they sign up thinking they're going to be doing behind the lines work. They're, for example, going to be in a trench digging unit or in a like loading logistics or something like that. They get there, they arrive, and they find they're in a combat unit. Right? The numbers they think are still low. The UK thinks Russia is still trying to get these programs up and running. But Russia really needs to avoid these unpopular domestic mobilization measures. And currently, the UK estimates 900 casualties a day from the Russian armed forces. So they absolutely need to find ways to get more soldiers in the fight. Now, we're going to take a look at just how appealing that salary looks to a Nepalese citizen or a Kazakh citizen. But thankfully, if you feel like you are getting ground down, you don't have to be like the Russian forces, right? You can just turn to Strike Gum, right? Strike Gum, 90 milligrams caffeine in every single piece, 100 milligrams alpha GPC inspired. I created it with the guys at Liquid Core, informed by my time in Afghanistan, where when I needed that energy on a long combat patrol, I had to pop an energy drink, like these gross things called Rippets. If you know, you know. They're terrible. And I wished I had a way I could caffeinate, just put it in my pocket, put it in a cargo pocket, and just zip it out, pop it in, chew it, and get the caffeine hit I needed. That's why I created Strike Gum. It uses natural caffeine, none of the like artificial encapsulated stuff. If you've ever had like an energy drink and you were like, damn, this said it had 90 milligrams of caffeine and I don't feel any of it, it's probably because it was artificial caffeine. It just doesn't metabolize the same way. But, I pay the extra money to get this natural caffeine in here because it just hits different. So check us out. We're on Amazon or strikegum.com. Thanks to the dozens of people who've left us reviews on Amazon. If you've had a good experience, a 5-star experience, man, it means the world that you guys put those ratings on there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what this sort of offer looks like to someone from Nepal. The average Nepali salary per month is $600. So Russia's offering them 4 times the typical wage. So that's the equivalent of about $120,000 a year, right? The average American worker makes about $35,000 a year. Even if you're generous and say the average American full-time worker makes about $50K a year, they're offering them the equivalent of about $200,000 a year. That would draw a lot of people, especially given that they say you don't need any particular training, you don't need to have any special skills. You can imagine if such a job were to exist in the United States, a lot of people would sign up. In Kazakhstan, it's even more, it's almost as stark. The average salary is about $750 a month. So they're being offered 3 times their average salary. Again, really, you're looking at $150,000 to $200,000 a month or a year if you were to like proportionately calibrate it to the United States. Really crazy stuff. But here's the interesting part. I want to point out one more story that I thought was good and wanted to talk about. That is a survey recently done by the French. Let's see if we can get this thing translated to English here. Nope. Take us back. There you go. Close this autoplayer. That on a recent survey, but between June and December 2023, found 57% of young French people surveyed were ready to enlist in the event of war, right? French people showing a renewed patriotism, ready to defend their country in the event of conflict, according to one study, the first since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And really interesting, because it is very unusual to see this sort of thing, especially in this day and age, especially given the level of protests against the French government and French policymaking. That given that there's so much unpopular unrest against the government, that there still remains a deep sense of patriotism among French youth. Really fascinating stuff, and a sign, right? I don't think this means France is going to like start drafting people or start marching towards Kiev. But what I think this is reflective of is the fact that when France makes some of these statements to Russia, it says, hey, we won't rule out ground troops. There's some red lines you can't cross. France is willing to intervene in ways that our EU partners might not be willing to. When you see this survey data, and the Kremlin sees it too, they will know. They'll say, man, this is credible. Macron won't face terrible political blowback if he were to implement some kind of ground force policy. And so it makes Macron stick when he threatens to use the French military. It makes it look that much more credible because he's going to have popular backing. Anyway, guys, that is really all I had for you. Thank you guys so much. As always, a huge thank you to the members at combatvetnews.com, the Colonel tier members, our Lieutenant tier members. I really could not do this without you guys. You guys are making this thing happen for me, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.